And now we're up to Daf Tesamid Beis. The Pligi Rab Shim Rabbanon Ukitani. Right, our Mishnah mentions Eishes Achiv Shlo Hayop Olamo, who patters up the tzara from Chalitza and Yibum that only could reflect the sheet of the Chachamim, and not Rabbi Shimon. Now, in order to explain the Gemara's answer, we'll have to spend a little time on the machlokis between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan, and zoom in, so to speak, on the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Now, what I'm about to present here in Rabbi Shimon is what I call the general understanding of Rabbi Shimon. We're going to have one man, the Yomi Rav Oshia, who has a different understanding of Rabbi Shimon. But now we leave out Rav Oshia. The Gemara is going to actually reject Rav Oshia. So we're going to go with the well-trodden path in understanding Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon holds the following: that if there are three brothers, but only Reuven and Shimon right now are alive. Levi is going to be born a little bit later on. So now Reuven marries Sarah, and he dies without children. Sarah falls for Yevamot to Shimon, and Shimon was miyabim Sarah. In such a case, if Levi is born subsequent to the Yibum of Shimon to Sarah, then when Shimon dies, Sarah falls for Yibum to Levi, and Levi is miyabim. If he wants to, he's miyabim Sarah. Why? Because the moment that Shimon was miyabim Sarah, Eishes Reuven, he now takes over the original Zika. The original Zika of Reuven is gone. It's a brand new Zika when Shimon now marries Sarah, Eishes Reuven. And therefore, when Levi is born and Shimon is still alive, according to Shimon, that's considered like Eishes Achiv Shahaya Ba'olam. And therefore, Levi will be miyabim Sarah. Under what circumstances would Rab Shimon admit to the Chachamim that Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo Eino Choletzes Ve'eino Misyabemes? That's a case where Reuven, after marrying Sarah, dies. Then Levi is born, and then Shimon is miyabim Sarah Eishes Reuven. So the Gemara says, "B'nolad ulabasof yibem lo polig Rabbi Shimon." In a case where Levi was born after the death of Reuven, but prior to the Yibum of Shimon to Sarah, and then Shimon dies, Reb Shimon agrees that in such a case, there's no Yibum. Why? Because at the time that Levi was born, the Zika to the Zika to Reuven was very much alive and active. So the Gemara says that we can very simply explain our Mishnah, even according to Reb Shimon, in the case where Levi was born before Shimon was miyabim Sarah. The Gemara asks, "V'amar Rav Oshia cholakay Reb Shimon af berishona." According to Rav Oshia's transmission of Rabbi Shimon, even in the case where Levi was born before the Yibum of Shimon to Sarah, it still is, Yibum is still active, and then there's no way of reconciling our Mishnah whatsoever with Rabbi Shimon. So where it says, "He toasted Rabbi Yosha," we never accepted Rabbi Yosha. Now the Gemara is going to quote a Mishnah from later on in Daf Chavav. We have four brothers. Two of them married two sisters, and those who married it, and there are another two brothers, and the two brothers who married two sisters died without children. So here we have something called achos zikukasa, because since these two brothers were married to two sisters, each one of the two sisters is achos zikukasa. And the Mishnah says that if one of the two sisters was an erva to one of the two brothers, the two surviving brothers, then as far as that brother is concerned, he could be miyabim hatzara, because the erva doesn't fall for yibum. Now, if one of the two is asura on one of the brothers with Isur erva, then the zika is completely removed. Achosa asura, let's say her sister has a similar kind of erva to the other brother. So in this case, we can apply the principle of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Rabbi Yehuda Amarav in all the 15 arayos, anikori bahen asura lezeh, muteres lezeh, asura lezeh, muteres lezeh. Right? You can have a situation where the two women that fall for yibum, one of them is muteres lezeh, but asura lezeh, and the other is just the opposite. And now we're going to try to analyze this statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. Rabbi Yehuda himself, who was quoting Rav, mitargem, he understood the words of Rav as saying the following: that our Mishnah, I'm sorry, not our Mishnah. This is a Mishnah later on Daf Yutes. The Mishnah applies only to 9 arayos. That's called mechamoso v'elach. Shisa debei reisha. Shisa debei reisha. The first 6, if you might recall from our first shir on this Masechta, was bito and bas bito, and so forth and so forth. There were 6 that fit into that carrier of bito and bas bito. And in those cases, you could not have a case of shtei achios, asura lezeh, muteres lezeh. My timer. Why is that so? Kevan de bito, in the case of shtei achayos, of 2 sisters, b'onsim mishkachas, but b'nisuin lo mishkachas. You could only imagine a case of asura lezeh, muteres lezeh in a case of ones, but not in a case of nisuin. And b'nisuin kamairi, b'onsin lo kamairi. Our Mishnah is not talking about a case of onsin, which in itself is a little bit difficult, but that's what it says over here. So this is the interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, of Rav's statement, based on the principle that b'nisuin kamairi, b'onsim lo kamairi, and therefore bito, since it's only possible to work out b'onsim, because again, if it's going to be b'nisuin, then it's Eishes Achiv, so he couldn't have possibly, the other brother could have married her if it was b'nisuin. The only possibility is that it's not Eishes Achiv because it was ba'onsim. And Abaye Mitargem, he interprets that Mishnah and the klal of Asura Lezeh Muteres Lezeh after bito me'anusaso, even in a case where it was bito me'anusaso, and therefore the Mishnah applies even to case of ones. You could have this din, in other words, Abai is willing to say that if, you'll have to work it out in the case of Nisuin, you'll work it out in the case of Nisuin, but if you can only work it out in the case of Onsim, then let it be in the case of Onan. But the case of Eishes Achiv, Shalohaya Balamo, is not included in this din. And the Gemara is going to ask now my timer. Why doesn't Abai agree to interpret Rav that the Mishnah later on is talking about a case of Eishes Achiv Shel Bolam. And the answer is going to be Kevan to Rab Shimon who Mishkachas Lo, who Rabbanan Lo Mishkachas Lo Beplukto Lo Kamairi. The only possibility of Asur Lezeh Muteres Lezeh in a case of Eishes Achiv Shel Bolam is only according to Rab Shimon. So Mirza Hashem, that's where we'll pick it up tomorrow. Just to explain, B'li Neder, why it only works out according to Reb Shimon in the case of Eishes Achiv Shel Bolam and not according to the Rabbanon. Let me wish you a great day. Tomorrow's a fast day, so I don't know. It might be a little bit later. I mean, let's